Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, and it is time for the 2023 Wimbledon Power Rankings. This is tough, huh? The Power Rankings over the course of the clay court season is a nice way to kind of track players' form and results and how things change over the course of what is generally like a 6-week stretch from Monte Carlo until the end of Rome. Grass court season, very different, 3 weeks long, and that means not only do we have less data, less results to work with in the immediate lead up, but even in past years, we have sample sizes that are quite frankly small. And that is why for the Wimbledon Power Rankings, it feels almost impossible to leave my own projections out of it like I try to do with the French Open Power Rankings. And this winds up being a much more subjective exercise, which is okay. But honestly, I thought I didn't do a Wimbledon Power Rankings last year. And then someone was like, yeah, you did. And then I looked and yeah, I did. I want to start by looking at that Wimbledon Power Rankings from last year. You're going to notice something, all right? So here it is. It was on May 21st, and this is what it looked like. Nadal had won the first two majors of the year, but Djokovic was still number one. Matteo Berrettini was number three. I didn't even really take Berrettini all that seriously, but as like, you know, a contender to potentially win the title. I did not. But it was just impossible to deny his stature, his status as that number three guy after going undefeated over the course of the grass court season and being the reigning Wimbledon finalist, right? You just had to. After that was Hurkacz, who was coming off of a semifinal. Felix, who excels on the grass. Alcaraz was at number 6. We just didn't know what Alcaraz was on grass. Remember, he didn't play any grass tennis in the lead up to Wimbledon last year, so it was kind of like who knows what we're going to get. Cilic was number 7. Marin Cilic was playing well last year. Then Kyrgios was 8. I want to pause there. First of all, you know, obviously Nick was the guy who, in hindsight, was under-ranked. Of course, there was no history. It had been well over 5 years since we had seen Nick make the second week of a major. So that's why he was so low, despite showing some good signs last year in the lead up to Wimbledon. So that's why, you know, for the first time really in a long time, Kyrgios was included in a power rankings for a major. Like, this was the first time in a long time. Turned out he should have been even higher. But what I really want to kind of point out here about the Wimbledon power rankings last year is that 4 of the top 8 are either out of the picture now or have serious health concerns. Nadal, Berrettini, Auger-Aliassime, Cilic, and Kyrgios. And last year, we were already saying, wow, the grass court contenders are kind of thin. Like, there just aren't that many guys who you feel great about contending at Wimbledon. And that's what we were saying last year. And now this year, you take 8 of the guys who we at least put in the top 8 last year, and they're not even healthy? Okay, that is my intro. Now let's get into the 2023 Wimbledon Power Rankings. Let's begin with the next out. Here I have Alex de Minaur, who has an excellent record on grass and, of course, making the Queen's final before falling to Carlos Alcaraz. That record is 24-15. Now, at Wimbledon, he's had a little bit less success, 6-4 overall, and only 2 top 50 wins. Both of them are against Marco Cecchinato, who's never won a match in a major outside of Roland Garros. I just have trouble seeing de Minaur as being a danger to the very best in the world with the lack of firepower, be it with the serve or off the ground. So while I could easily see him making a 4th round or a quarterfinal, I left him off my top 10. Also just missing the top 10 is Taylor Fritz, who is a two-time Eastbourne champion. I found his run last year to be somewhat impressive in particular, although if you look at his record against top 20 players on grass, it's still 0-8. His recent struggles at majors have been a bit concerning. He has underperformed at the last three ever since making the Wimbledon quarterfinal last year and losing to Rafa Nadal, even though Rafa Nadal couldn't really serve in that match towards the tail end. As far as Fritz being, helped by the grass, hurt by the grass. Look, I love the first serve. I mean, Fritz has a great first serve, but I don't love his ground game as much. I prefer his ground game on hard courts. I think the low contact points on grass hurt him on both the forehand side and the backhand side. So he just misses my top 10. Cam Norrie is also in the next out. As a reigning semifinalist at Wimbledon, I think he deserves this kind of respect. His career record on grass is 19-15. He had that run at Wimbledon last year, as I mentioned. Never beat a top 20 player at Wimbledon. However, that factored into him not making the top 10. And overall, his current form is a concern for me. Forget the grass, forget Wimbledon, just his form. Since the start of clay court season, Cam Norrie is 2-6 against top 50 players. My final next out player is Nick Kyrgios. He has yet to win a match in 2023, was crushed by Wu Yibing in his only match, so he is 0-1 on the season. But if you look at what he's done on grass, it's actually a whole lot better than pretty much anybody other than Novak Djokovic. Literally. That's how thin these grass court resumes are. I mean, he's got 20 wins at Wimbledon in his career, 20-8 record, 36-19 on grass. That's also a fantastic record. But of course, he's not in the top 10 despite being the reigning Wimbledon finalist, because I just don't believe he will be healthy or in form. For a player like Nick to attempt to come back and then ultimately have to go back to the sidelines is always a bad sign. And also the idea that Nick Kyrgios doesn't need matches or doesn't need to put in the work in order to have success, it's a myth, and it's always been a myth. We've seen the version of Nick Kyrgios who is not in a good physical state or is not, putting the hard miles in on the practice court. And that version of Nick Kyrgios is barely a top 50 player. Last year, we saw the Nick Kyrgios who's committed and is in the gym and is keeping his body strong and is healthy. And now you have a top 10 level player. So the idea that Kyrgios is just going to show up here severely compromised, no wins under his belt, and is just going to make up for it with his talent is not an idea I really buy into. So the fact that he even gets a mention here in the next out is me showing massive respect to his grass court capabilities and his talents, but I can't put him in the top 10. I will say players who I considered including in the next out, Grigor Dimitrov, who is a veteran, who has a body of work, a former Wimbledon semifinalist, but he hasn't been past the second round at Wimbledon since 2017. Also in decent form, so I really did consider him, but I couldn't quite do it. Casper Ruud as well, is somebody who I considered just based on, how well he's done on all other surfaces in the last 2 years. But of course, on grass, there's really just nothing you can point to. He's 3-5 on the surface. He's looked unbelievably uncomfortable based on his schedule decisions, which you could defend him for. You could say it's smart long term, or you could be like me and think that it's not the best thing for his career and, would advise him differently. Regardless of where you stand in that debate, there's no debate that it's not really going to help him do well at Wimbledon this year, so I left him off. Of course, I also considered Felix Auger-Aliassime and Matteo Berrettini. I just think the health issues for both of them are too concerning to include in the next out or the top 10. Now, let us go to that top 10. Coming in at number 10 is Stefanos Tsitsipas. I'm honestly not sure how this is going to be looked at. Am I ranking Tsitsipas higher than you expected, lower than expected? Because on one hand, usually Tsitsipas is a more serious contender coming into a major than number 10. In fact, I think fairly regularly he's a top 5 contender. But on the other hand, the Wimbledon performances have been bad. He is 0-2 against top 50 players at Wimbledon. He's 5-5 overall, but perhaps even more concerning has been the lead up to this year's Wimbledon, where he is 1-3 overall. His only win coming in a third set tiebreak, just barely scraping by against Gregoire Barrère, losing in Eastbourne to Yannick Hanfmann, a player who's had almost all of the success in his career, albeit he's in good form, on clay. I'm worried about Tsitsipas mentally right now. I'm not seeing great signs about what kind of headspace he's in, just based on how hard he's fighting on court, the way he's handling adversity, his ability to focus. And then there's stuff on grass, technically speaking, that regardless of what kind of mood or mental game Tsitsipas is able to bring to the table, becomes a problem. The return of serve on his backhand side is challenged on the grass to a far greater extent than the other surfaces. And when he's hitting his backhand in rally, the heavy topspin, the lack of depth, the ball just tends to sit up to be attacked when Tsitsipas is hitting his backhand on grass, doesn't flatten it out as well as he really needs to on this surface. And defending the backhand can become an issue on the grass, especially because his slice is underdeveloped and can cause problems for him in particular. So I'm not too high on Stefanos Tsitsipas coming into this Wimbledon whatsoever. I don't really know how you could be. That said, he's got weapons. He, at his best, is a great player. He's got the serve, the forehand, the transition game. I figure you at least give him number 10. At number 9 is Jannik Sinner, who unfortunately has suffered a bit of a downturn in 2023 after showing marvelous consistency from the Australian Open up until Rome. He's now suffered what I would call 3 upset defeats in a row, and that does not include his retirement in Halle against Alexander Bublik. So now we have health concerns, we have form concerns, and that kind of offsets what was a very positive Wimbledon 2022 for Jannik Sinner, where he beat Carlos Alcaraz, took 2 sets over Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinal match. I like Jannik Sinner's ground game on grass, the way he uses big power off both wings, can flatten the ball out, can take it early. That said, I do wish that I felt a little bit more confident in his serve if you're just looking at his game. And ultimately, I want to feel better about Jannik Sinner, again, given how well he did at Wimbledon, but the form isn't there, the lead-in isn't there, there's health question marks, and I can't do better for Sinner than number 9. At number 8 is Sebastian Korda. I feel like he's really dangerous. The sample size is small. There is not a huge history of Sebastian Korda contending for big titles, period. And that's what hurts him on this list. But what helps him on this list is his Queen's semifinal run, which was impressive. He beat Dan Evans. He beat Francis Tiafoe. He beat Cam Norrie. I respect all 3 of those wins. And then you think back to how good Sebastian Korda was this January. Adelaide final, Australian Open quarterfinal, bunch of really good wins. Almost beat Djokovic in a final. Had the wrist injury, it derailed his season, but you got the sense that Korda, with a much bigger serve, with much stronger legs, better fitness, working on the injury prevention, especially in the lower body, you got the sense that he was about to make that jump. And let's face it, the wrist injury delayed that jump, but given his grass court resume already, 9-5 career record, 4-2 against the top 20, I feel like this could be the breakout tournament for Sebastian Korda, and he lands at number 8. At number 7 is Andrei Rublev. who has some good grass court results to his name, namely a couple of runner-ups in Halle. Wimbledon, not so much. Best he's done is a fourth round where he really had an opportunity to make a quarterfinal. Lost to Marton Fucsovics because he couldn't handle Fucovic's backhand slice, which to me is a concern for Andrei Rublev. On grass, he's forced to hit more backhands, less forehands, and he struggles with the low backhand. That said, I like his aggressive returning. I like his early ball striking, his offensive mindset, his ability to change direction off of both wings quite well. I could see Andrei Rublev having a big Wimbledon. I wouldn't want him to come up against a big server. I covered on Monday Match Analysis how Rublev hasn't really enjoyed playing big servers, whether it be issues with not feeling enough rhythm to play his best tennis or issues with making enough first serve returns in play. That is one concern, but I feel like if the draw shakes out correctly for Rublev, maybe this is the tournament where he could make his first major semifinal. It does hurt him a bit that I haven't seen him make that run at a major yet, but I also continue to feel like winning that title in Monte Carlo mentally might help him get through the finish line if he does reach his, what would it be, his 8th career major quarterfinal, something in that ballpark where obviously he hasn't been able to win any. Rublev at number 7, I could see this going either way from him. I wouldn't be shocked if he were upset, but I wouldn't be shocked if he made a run. At number 6 is Hubert Hurkacz, 2021 Wimbledon semifinalist. A lot of those elite servers are, marred by health concerns. Berrettini, FAA, Kyrgios. But Hurkacz is healthy, and he is one of the best first serves in men's tennis. Top 5 in that category, easily top 5. And we know how much weight that carries at Wimbledon. So while I haven't been thrilled with Hubert Hurkacz's development as a whole over the course of the last 2 years, and I haven't been overly impressed with his 2023, I still feel like he can ride that serve and also his flat pace-absorbing backhand combined with his really high-level net rushing and can parlay those things into a Wimbledon run. I would not be surprised if he were able to do that. Plus, he has really gotten comfortable coming through close matches in 2023 with a phenomenal record in both tiebreaks and deciding sets. That's a double-edged sword because I do think for Hurkacz, he doesn't break serve enough to avoid close matches early on. And that makes me uneasy because first couple rounds in a major, you want to be able to get through those matches without having to sweat. And that's where I'm not confident in Hubert Hurkacz. But could I see him just continuing to scrape out wins and suddenly he's in a quarterfinal or a semifinal? Yeah, I could see that given how good his first serve is. At number 5 is Frances Tiafoe, who has, really come on in the last year, which is why he's currently the number 10 player in the world. Career high ranking, U.S. Open semifinal, Indian Wells semifinal. But if you're going to ask me, Gill, who is a guy who just gets much better on grass, someone whose regular game is elevated by this surface, I give you Frances Tiafoe. The fact that he can suffocate you with his court positioning, his frequent net rushing. He does a great job not only of being a great net rusher and being a great volleyer, but just getting forward often outside of serve and volley, coming in behind his return even if he needs to. His big first serve, flat weapon, gets the aces, gets the free points. And his backhand, which on clay is a borderline weakness, but on a grass court is a bona fide strength. It's flat, it's precise, and when he trades it cross court as effectively as he was at, let's say, the U.S. Open last year, it sets up his forehand beautifully, and we know he can bring the firepower off that forehand with a nice live arm and a very heavy forehand that he is able to attack with. So, look, I know Tiafoe at number 5 feels like a bit of a stretch, especially because, the grass court history, the Wimbledon history, it's fine. He made the 4th round last year. Maybe this is one of those more subjective listings that is required because there's less grass court kind of results that we have to work with. But I have my eyes on Frances Tiafoe for Wimbledon, and I think this is a big opportunity for him. At number 4 is Holger Rune, a guy with barely any sample size. Kind of reminds me of Jannik Sinner coming into Wimbledon last year, but even better because Sinner was 0-4 coming into last year's Wimbledon. He was so inexperienced, we kind of assumed that maybe he didn't like the grass, but I don't know. It's only 4 matches. And then turned out he played great tennis. I could see the same thing happening for Rune, only for Holger, he has that Queen's semifinal now under his belt. So we've seen some success. There's still a bit of mystery factor, sure. But the one thing that was holding me back from feeling good about Holger Rune coming into Roland Garros was the physical stuff. Worried that he was going to wear down physically, and he did. Well, for Wimbledon, that isn't a concern. Quicker points, faster matches, bang, bang tennis. That'll be good for the physical side of things. Now, what about the technical side? It is true that the hard court play for Rune was not nearly as good as his clay court play. And if you only watched him in 2023, you might think that his game is not suited to offensive, serve +1 oriented tennis. But if you watched him last fall on the indoor hard courts, you saw that he can serve aggressively. He can play quick points, dominate the 0-4 shot rallies, aggressive returns, big +1 forehands, frequent charging of the net. All of these things are in his arsenal. We haven't really seen it this year, but we saw it last year. It's not as if that Holger Rune has only had success relying on his brilliant clay court defense. So, look, Rune, there's a mystery factor here, but I'm not as worried about the physicality. I do believe he has the technical skills, and I still like him in big matches. I still think that as long as he feels like he has his legs under him, he's got a confidence, a swagger, and a boldness where at the end of majors, I'm not too concerned about the mental side of things for Holger. At number 3 is Daniil Medvedev. A kind of a complicated placement here. There are parts about his game that I really like on grass, and there are parts that I don't like on grass. The parts that I don't like is that he just can't rely as much on his defense. And Daniil likes to rely on his defense and his trading, but he needs to take more initiative on grass. He needs to be more offensive off the ground because it's simply impossible to defend effectively enough on this surface for Medvedev to not make that adjustment. Plus, the return position can hurt him against certain opponents. That said, he's got a massive first serve and a flat backhand and a flat forehand that is rewarded by this surface. And most importantly, he's just been the 3rd best player in the world all year long, really. Look, the lead-in hasn't been convincing. Lost to Manarino first round, Hertogenbosch. Lost to Bautista Agut quarterfinals in Halle. 8-4 at Wimbledon, but he's only played once since the summer of 2019, when he really became Daniil Medvedev. Look, am I really confident in Medvedev? No, but do I feel like anyone should be in this number 3 spot over him? Also, no. It's a very shoulder shruggy kind of placement where there are parts of Medvedev's game that I think should work on grass, and he's been the 3rd best player. So, yeah, he gets to stay here in his sweet spot of number 3, I suppose. Carlos Alcaraz. He won Queens. He looked unbelievably comfortable moving around the grass court. He increased his serve aggression. His offensive sensibilities were on full display. He has every offensive tool that you could ever want or ask for. And if there were issues in his return or in his pace absorption, it just didn't come through because his strengths were so overwhelming. Not to mention, obviously, just what he's done all year long. He's won the majority of the events he's played this year, which is absurd. He's clearly number 2, and I don't really think there's much room for even arguing that. In a similar vein, there's not much room for arguing Novak Djokovic at number 1, a man who's won the last 4 Wimbledons, a man who hasn't lost a completed match at Wimbledon since 2016. Novak moves and defends much, much better than anyone else on grass. It's not even close. His pace absorption, his depth, his return of serve, it helps him so much against guys who expect to come to the court, whether it be Berrettini or Kyrgios, and just hit massive first serves and expect that that's going to be enough. It's not. It's never enough against Djokovic on grass. It doesn't matter how well you serve. It's going to come back. And that's just such a huge advantage that Novak has had on this surface. Not to mention, on the offensive side of the coin, the spot serving and the precision +1 offense from Novak has been just spectacular in recent years. So he's got the total package. And as far as his form is concerned, obviously he comes off the Roland Garros title. Will he be feeling some pressure? Yes, but not to the extent, with the Grand Slam that he would feel it at the US Open. And we already saw him kind of overcome whatever pressure he was feeling at Wimbledon 2021 in the same spot. Hasn't played a warm-up, didn't play a Wimbledon warm-up, but that is par for the course for Novak Djokovic. In 7 Wimbledon titles that he's won, only once has he actually played a lead-in. So Djokovic is easily first in the Wimbledon power rankings. Draw comes out tomorrow. I'll talk to you then for the preview. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.